Nichiren Shonin's sacrifice, passion, and belief in the Lotus Sutra has resonated 100 years. We pay tribute to those who made this possible. Reverend Gyo-un Takagi was a pioneer in spreading Nichiren Buddhism in Hawaii. He visited Maui in 1915 by boat and meticulously documented historical propagation in a personal diary. However, it was Reverend Genyu Oba who committed to Maui to become our first resident minister in 1918. He established a temporary place of worship in Wailuku in November 1920. The opening ceremony was attended by Mr. William Megero, the chief accountant for Hawaii Commercial and Sugar Company. As a child, Megero lived in Yokohama and spoke fluent Japanese. Fond of Japanese people and culture, he later made a free land offer to any Buddhist group in which Reverend Oba applied for and received. Shortly after Japan's approval was granted, a few members accompanied Reverend Oba and walked for miles to raise funds for its construction. In Kumamoto, the great news prompted the gifting of a statue of Lord Kato Kiyomasa, a fervent follower of Nichiren, by Homonji Temple. A dedication for its completion was held on November 11, 1922. 2 years later, Reverend Shoei Tateishi succeeded Reverend Oba as the second resident minister. The installation ceremony was officiated by Reverend Oba prior to his departure to Japan. Reverend Tateishi's tenure was short-lived as he was assigned to Kapapala Temple on the Big Island. Reverend Chu-ong Fujimoto became the third resident minister in 1925. The concern over minister retention arose when he went back to his homeland in less than 3 years. Sadly, Mr. Megero, who helped in the establishment of this mission, passed away in June 1928. Both he and his wife Lucy were given Buddhist titles, and their graves remain to this day on the church grounds. Mr. Jimyo Yagishita was a Japanese teacher who was ordained a few months later as the fourth resident minister in 1930. Novel activities such as calligraphy and sumo attracted members. However, his two greatest achievements during his 9-year stay were the building of the Seishoko Hall in his first 6 months and getting electricity for the church in 1937. Buddhist churches were ordered by the military to close in December 1941. After the war, Bishop Kanryu Mochizuki returned from relocation camps on the mainland. Special church affairs such as the 30th anniversary of Pu'unene Nichiren Mission was conducted by him. Reverend Taimyo Shinkai arrived from Nagano-ken in 1952 to assist Bishop Mochizuki. He previously served as an Army artillery officer. The negative military experience in Burma motivated him to turn to ministry and attended Risho University. Upon graduation, he joined the ranks of overseas missionaries. A statewide commemorative 50th anniversary of Nichiren Buddhism to Hawaii was presided by Acting Archbishop Shobun Kubota, who flew 18 hours from Japan to Honolulu. On May 9, 1953, Reverend Kubota and a group of ministers flew to Maui and was greeted by President Jotaro Ochiai. An impressive number of members attended this event. President Ochiai on the far left provided a welcome address. He was married to Iseko Hanada, a family man with 38 years as a landscaper at Bishop National Bank. Mr. Ochiai was the temple's first president. The Setsubun bean-throwing ceremony seemed exclusively for men. Here is a picture of him and another dedicated member, Hamazo Endo, then in 1939. 30 years later, chatting with Mr. Imao. The war deprived the community from traditional events like Obong. Reverend Shinkai needed to revive the temple as a social gathering place. Sumo, picnics, and monthly outdoor theater resumed. He hustled to please the senior members. But he reached youth through the martial arts such as kendo, judo, and introducing culture with his sword dance. Reverend Shinkai's first assignment was in Kapapala, where he met a Nisei girl from Hilo, Akiko Kajiwara, and later transferred to Maui in 1957. Vast fields of sugarcane fronted the church, and a cotton bush border separated Pu'unene from Kahului. Almost 20 years passed before the induction of the fifth resident minister. Cultural practices prevailed. While the Reverend focused on his duties, his wife ran Sunday school and choreographed simple dances for Hanamatsuri. Reverend Shinkai, like many in his field, held second jobs to make ends meet. Through Masa Hokamo's connections and his wife's script writing, Reverend Shinkai became a popular Japanese announcer at the newly opened Kenui radio station. Reverend Shinkai's sudden passing on April 29, 1963 on Oahu created a dilemma for the family. With the encouragement of boss and Mrs. Yokouchi, Zuk Matsui, and George Kubota, Mrs. Shinkai followed the path of her husband to support her family. Reverend Benjo Kaneko, Reverend Kyoyu, and Nichijo Fuji were inspirational. Her father, Tasuki Kajiwara, cared for the children while she completed 10 months of rigorous training in Minobu. An inauguration conducted by Bishop Rushin Okihara was held on January 5, 1966. With Reverend Myoru Aniya of Wahiawa and the bishop by her side, she vowed to do her best. A period of adjustment ensued, and she eventually gained the congregation's respect as a bilingual minister. The new year brought the hope of prosperity. This is how we remembered the interior of the church and the no Kotsudo, as tragedy struck 3 months later on March 8, 1975, when the church and residents were destroyed by fire. Salvage items included the 100-year statue, a stone-etched sculpture donated by Jukichi Kawakami, and urns that endured the heat. Groundbreaking service was performed by Bishop Kyotsu Hori. Thanks to generous donations and Reverend Shingaku Oikawa's leadership, a new church was built ahead of schedule. A dedication was held in September of the same year. Myocho Shinkai was reassigned to Wahiawa and worked until her death on March 31, 1992. Shizue Ueda fulfilled her father's wishes when she became Reverend Myojo Ueda in October 1975. She was the seventh minister, known to have extraordinary healing powers, and coincidentally passed away 22 years ago on November 11 at the age of 94. On August 18, 1979, Reverend Rue Nagayama became our eighth minister. Prior to returning to Hiroshima in 1984, a parking lot was added in the back of the temple, and a tomb of unknown souls was placed next to the Megeros. Reverend Kaiju Kumazawa was installed April 1985 as the ninth minister by Bishop Senchu Murano. At his first Shinnin Enkai, emceed by Jane Azeka, musical instruments were played by then-President Paul Katahara, Jun and Riki Kumazawa, and songs by Mr. Sato livened the party. He and Mrs. Kumazawa creatively thought of ways to appeal to their members. This was the start of more fun to come. During his tenure, he started a newsletter called Jifu, the Benevolent Wind. Reverend Kumazawa not only performed Kito, but also practiced shiatsu, acupuncture, and studied Chinese medicine at Beijing University. He went above and beyond to accommodate members on the mainland to perform special blessings. The church earned a reputation for great sushi and manju, using Masako Imao and Mitsue Sato's white lima bean recipes. A second bone dance at the end of the season drew locals and tourists at Azeka Market. A joint memorial, oeshiki, and groundbreaking ceremony for the new columbarium was held on October 19, 1986. Senchu Murano officiated a no Kotsudo Rake Shiki service for the completion of the columbarium on June 17, 1988. Much gratitude to Iwao Sato and Bill Azeka, who spearheaded the project, and treasurer Stella Yamamoto. A year later, a 70th anniversary celebration was attended by 90 guests from Japan. The unveiling of the only bronze statue of Nichiren in the U.S. coincided with the 75th anniversary on June 4, 1993, and was officiated by Bishop Genyu Oba. These guests enjoyed a taste of Polynesian culture. Bishop Ogawa willingly became part of the entertainment. When Reverend Kumazawa resigned in January 1995, LA Minister Reverend Miyoko Seo served the temple for 7 months before the arrival of Reverend Chi-Shin Hirai, our 10th minister. Needed renovations identified by the Reverend resulted in structural improvements. The church often relied on Mr. Chikato Hamada to do these jobs. Unfortunately, Reverend Hirai was designated to start an international church in London. In his congratulatory message, he thanked members for having the perseverance in reaching 100 years. Bishop Genyu Ogawa appointed Reverend Daisuke Tomikawa on September 1, 1997. He was personable, enthusiastic, and engaged in work. His suggestion of selling mochi met the high demands of our community. Impressed with the success of our bone dances, Bishop Ogawa brought the idea back to the Betsuin. Reverend Tomikawa and Reverend Gakugyo Matsumoto of Hilo filled in for each other in times of need. In April 2000, Reverend Eiko Watanabe became his substitute while Reverend Tomikawa renewed his visa and retrieved his wife Eriko. Reverend Watanabe earnestly taught us how to practice our faith and support the temple. He is reminiscent of the wonderful years spent on Maui and will keep those cherished memories close to his heart. Reverend Tomikawa was unexpectedly summoned back to Japan in November 2001. Fond memories and vivid recollections were shared in his congratulatory address. His 2 sons, 19 and 15, are currently preparing to become Nichiren practitioners. In the summer of 2003, Reverend Bungen Kaneko became our 12th Reverend. It was his first experience in heading a church. Reverend Takasaki moved to Pu'unene in June 2006 with his wife Kunie and year-old daughter Sora. Talented in baking and crafts, Mrs. Takasaki enjoyed involvement. Always with a smile, Reverend Takasaki radiates sincerity and kindness all around him. He befriended neighbors Bully and Kay Badayos, who has repeatedly lent us a hand. Newly elected President Jackie Yamamoto's ties with the Lions Club benefited the church during his tenure. Reverend Takasaki attended Aragyo training and returned in March 2008 to perform Kito blessings. A family of 5 with the addition of Nene and Kona, the Takasakis moved to Hayward, California to manage the Nichiren Buddhist International Center. We are grateful to him for providing us with continual assistance. Remembering the exceptional support and mutual joy of chanting with members is what brought him back to join us today. Reverend Kawaguchi was our 14th and final minister at this temple. He expressed gratitude to our members with hopes of meeting us again. The pandemic compounded our strained congregation, yet we carried on with some activities. Despite these challenges, resilience emerged from officers who served for several years and held multiple positions. The board's leadership has pulled us through some tough times. Even without a resident minister, we thrived because Bishop Kanai, Reverend Yamamura, and religious supporters took care of our business. We thrive due to the generations of families like the Hondas, Kataharas, Sakatas, Kubotas, and Nagatas, where the Issei modeled hard work and integrity to their Nisei children, who in turn taught their Sansei descendants the values of continuing important rituals. Finally, we thrive due to friends and community partnerships established. Your presence will forever be embedded in Pu'unene Nichiren Mission's history. In Gasho, Namu Myoho Renge Kyo.